When I work with the president, very often we started a meal with an egg. Here in the US, we tend to use eggs only for breakfast or brunch, maybe.
You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm Editor-in-Chief Matt Rodbard, here with Senior Editor Anna Hezel.
A few years ago, Joshua David Stein wrote an essay for Taste about a short video clip that was filmed for an instructional cooking DVD in the 90s that millions of people around the world have watched and rewatched again. It's actually the video clip that taught me how to make an omelet. It might even be the video clip that taught you how to make an omelet. On today's episode of the Taste Podcast, I sit down with the 85-year-old chef behind this video clip, Jacques Pépin. Jacques Pépin has cooked for presidents and prime ministers and has taught generations of television audiences how to cook seasonally and economically. We talked about what he's been cooking, eating, and painting lately, and how his omelet technique has changed over the years. And if you haven't read Joshua David Stein's essay about Jacques Pépin's omelet video, you can find it on tastecooking.com or in the 2020 edition of Best American Food Writing. Here's me talking to Jacques. Jacques, thank you so much for joining me on the Taste Podcast. You're, of course, an accomplished chef, author, and television host. But on top of all of these qualifications, a lot of people know you as kind of the ultimate authority on eggs. My dad has been cooking a lot of your egg techniques over the course of the pandemic. And there's, of course, a very famous video of you from a segment from the 90s on YouTube cooking 2 styles of omelet. I wanted to ask, why are eggs an interesting medium to you? And why do you think people should learn how to cook them properly?
Well, to start with, they are very inexpensive. They're extremely versatile. You can do so many. They're available to most people in the world, from the poorest country to the richest one. There is no food which is as secret as an egg, according to MFK Fisher. And it's true. You can keep an egg for 3 weeks, a month. You know, it's easy, as I said, it's very inexpensive. And you can do hundreds of dishes. When I was a kid, certainly during the war, we get our protein from eggs, much more than from meat. Meat was kind of rare. Maybe once a week, and when we had meat, it was a piece of sausage that my mother browned one way or the other to add potato to it, to add all kind of other things. Meat was basically a flavoring agent. But egg, gratin of eggs, you know, with cheese, gratin of eggs, with spinach, with Swiss chard, with mushroom, with egg poached. And, you know, in classic French cooking, when I work with the president, very often we started a meal with an egg. Here in the US, we tend to use eggs only for breakfast or brunch, maybe. But for enough cocotte, you know, cocotte eggs, which is cooked in a little like a little soufflé mold. So we cover the bottom with herbs. Sometimes you have truffle. Sometimes very elegant thing. You poach the eggs on top to serve that or shrimp. On the first course, it's an excellent dish, which I do often for elegant dinner. So yes, eggs is maybe my favorite food of all. So
when it comes to cooking eggs, I mean, are you still mostly cooking these techniques that you learned as a young chef, or has your technique evolved over the course of your career? Are you still learning new egg tricks, in other words?
Yeah, that's a good question, but it's kind of very insidious. You know, you change, but you don't realize you change. I mean, I know I eat differently than I did 30, 40 years ago. Your metabolism changes, you get older. Maybe as a young chef, you tend to add to the dish. And as an old chef, you kind of remove all the embellishment of the dish to be left with something more essential. So, you know, you change, of course, and you absorb all the type of culture, all the type of cuisine. And I never put my finger exactly on it. You know, it's a process which has always been part of me, and I've been in the kitchen over 70 years now, so 72 years or so, professionally, really. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I mean, so one of the things that has changed probably since you started out as a cook and has changed even over the course of, the time that I've been cooking is that cookware has evolved so much.
Oh, yes.
And just like the quality of nonstick pans that you could use for cooking eggs. How important is the cookware itself when you're doing some of these techniques?
When I work at the Plaza Atelier in Paris or at Fouquet's, I was the breakfast chef there at some point. So, making omelet in the morning, that type of stuff. Well, I had a cast iron pan, which I seasoned very carefully, scrub it with salt, and kept it in my closet. Because someone would take it and they saute a piece of fish in it. And the whole thing has to be totally re-seasoned and all that. So, it was a big deal to keep your skillet or whatever without sticking. Now, with no stick pan, I mean, it's a breeze. I still have that old skillet pan hanging on the wall here. And it's a beautiful sway, so it makes a nice omelet. I don't use it, however. And I don't use it because it sticks. And it sticks because I don't use it. So it's a vicious circle, So anyway, yes, I use, my great thing, I use non-stick aluminum foil, for example. That's great. I put it on every tray. So the equipment, all of that has changed greatly. And it used to be more expensive. Now it's relatively inexpensive.
The last year and a half has really put a particular spotlight on the importance of home cooking, obviously as a way for us all to sustain ourselves, but also to educate ourselves and even to sort of entertain ourselves, I would say. Other than eggs, what have you been cooking the most over the last year and a half? And is there anything new that you've learned how to cook for the first time?
Well, this is a big question. I have been cooking usually what's in my refrigerator, what's in my freezer, what's in the pantry, what's at the market. I'm always defined by this, of course, defined by the season as well. People don't realize that, in full summer, this is where the tomato are really good to taste. In addition, they are the best nutritionally because they are rich maturity. And thirdly, more importantly, they are the cheapest. So, why not, follow the season? That's where the food is the best and the cheapest and in great quantity. So, yes, I do follow that. My daughter is the one showing those Facebook shows that we've done for like a year and a half. And I think we've done 220. And so sometimes she tells me, could you do some of this or that too? Or like, for example, we have a foundation that we work with Community Kitchen to teach people who have been kind of disenfranchised by life, like people who come out of jail, homeless people, former drug addicts, veterans, and so forth. So those people are not young too. And often those people to get to go to the food pantry to get food. So my son-in-law told me, why don't you do a series of recipes? I'm going to give you stuff. So he get me a whole bag of canned beans, canned string beans, canned chicken, canned salmon, canned stuff that I don't really use. So I use those because that's what people would get like that, to show people to cook on a budget with something inexpensive. And there is nothing wrong with any of those type of cooking,
I was going to ask you about canned food because I've been following some of your recent videos that you've been publishing on Facebook and Instagram and on YouTube. And I saw a really cool video involving canned tuna. I saw a cool, simple pasta that you made with anchovies and garlic. Are you a big canned fish person? And what are your favorites?
I don't think that, but I mean, I have plenty canned in my pantry, and certainly from anchovy fillet to tuna to mackerel to sardine. But I don't know what to have for lunch. I have a few slices of tomato, a few leaves of lettuce. I open a can of sardine, put a bit of olive oil on top. Yeah, sardine, tuna, all of it. And beans. I mean, from black beans to red kidney beans to cannellini beans to chickpeas to any of those, canned tomato, canned tomato paste, and so forth. All of those are as good, sometimes better than what you get fresh, unless you get it very fresh. So there is nothing wrong with... There's nothing wrong with anything, the results is what counts,
Yeah. So you've been making instructional videos like the ones we just spoke about for decades now, really. And now, I mean, so much has changed. Pretty much anyone with a cell phone and a TikTok account can make a cooking video.
Yes.
You don't need like a TV crew like you used to. So do you watch any of these new cooking videos on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of these online outlets?
I don't really look at much of this myself, but I don't even look at mine, to tell you the truth. But certainly, I have done 13 series of 26 shows with KQED, the PBS station in San Francisco, and other in New York for the last 35 years. And I still remember the last time I did a series 5-6 years ago, KQED had to raise $1.3 million to do 26 shows that we did. We did a book with it. Wow, I do those videos there. We are 2 people in the kitchen. It's Tom Hopkins with my friend. He lives in town here. He's a professional photographer. And he's done my book for 38 years. And he does video as well. So he's the one who does my art site also. So, but Tom comes here. He put a camera on a tripod that I looked at, and then with his hand, the telephone, he goes above my head to take close up. And I cook and I do the dishes. So there is 2 people in the kitchen. There is Tom and me. So those show, I say $1.3 million to do a series. I go to the market and get for $150, $200, whatever, maybe a bit more. We usually do 10 shows in one day when he comes. Those shows are 5-6 minutes, they are not long, but they cost basically nothing, So yes, and it's pretty good. I mean, the work of the camera, the handheld camera, a telephone too, it's really amazing,
What do you think about sort of the democratization of cooking videos, just because people now can make videos on their cell phones? Because on the one hand, it means that people for free can often watch professional cooks show them a few skills that they maybe in other generations would have to go to culinary school for. But also there's so many videos now. Right,
absolutely. There is a different type of cooking. I worked with Julia Child for 50 years, or people like James Beard. Julia always said, I am not a professional chef. James Beard always said, I am not a professional chef, and many others. A professional chef is someone in the kitchen, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 12 o'clock you have 100 people sitting down to eat. So it's not a question of cooking something interesting, but you have to have the speed, the production, and all that, which is something else. So a professional chef has to be very trained with technique. And it's a question of repeat to be able to do something very fast. So a professional chef is first, for me, a technician. And then if he happens to have talent, and he goes somewhere else. That's not the case for a home cook. Now, I know a fair amount of professional chefs who are very good technicians and are relatively lousy cook. The food is okay, but never fantastic. Conversely, I know home cook who are fantastic cook with the taste. The kitchen may look like a disaster, thing left over, too much stuff, because you don't have the speed and the use. So those are 2 different types of things, So people who cook at home, with those video, of course, it's perfectly fine. Now, the video that I do, 4 or 5 minute video that I show, this is not to use really in a restaurant in production. It's something else. It's to try to make people's life easier using whatever you have in your refrigerator or something like that.
Yeah, and going back to Julia Child, I think part of what compelled so many people about her was not just the technical skill and the knowledge, but also just pure enthusiasm about French cuisine. It was just infectious. It got so many people interested in this cuisine.
Well, that's very important. You have to cook with love. You cannot cook indifferently. You have to put passion in it. You have to put love. And maybe cooking is maybe the purest expression of what love is. Because you cook for your kid or your mother or your grandfather, even a stranger. I mean, there is nothing else attached to it except to give something to people. So yes, cooking is, and that's what happened a lot maybe with the pandemic. I mean, people getting close together and stuck. That I'm sure that created a lot of divorce, but it also created a lot of people getting together, maybe for the first time, and starting to cook together. I mean, for me, in my family, it was always part of it. When my daughter Claudine, who's in her 50s now, but when she was a year and a half, I hold her in my arm and make her stir the pot. So she stirred, with me. So she ate it because she, quote, made it with Dad, So when I had my granddaughter coming, she stand on a little stool next to me. Now she's taller than me, but so I tell her, give me a bowl, give me that, give me the salad. Do you think it's clean enough? Let's get some parsley. So we get parsley in the garden. I say, taste it. She said, no, that's chive. No, that's parsley. Taste that one. That's tarragon. To come back, I take her to the market. I say, I need tomato. Buy them. You sure they are ripe? Did you smell them? Those pear. You smell those pears? They're ripe. So she touched the pear. She touched the tomato. Come back. Cook with me. Stand. And that created a canvas for a conversation. Not only you talk about this, but then you sit down and eat the food and talk. And one subject bring another subject. It's very difficult with kids now, which are attached to their iPhone and, they don't say anything. So it's very important to create that type of communication, and cooking does that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think so many people got to have that same experience just in the last year and a half of spending so much time at home, cooking more meals, spending time with their family. You've also been doing quite a bit of painting, is that right?
Yes, I did quite a lot, but I've been painting I have painting from 1961 but probably more now. In fact, I have an art show coming in I forget where, near Greenwich. In Stanford, in November. Yeah, the end of November. So, yes, and Tom, my friend, who is the photographer, as I said, also run. I am very lucky because I would never have done an art site or doing this. He did it. I would never have done Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff, or the Jacques Pépin Foundation. My daughter did it. My son-in-law did it. So I've been very lucky this way.
Yeah, you're surrounding yourself with the right people. I wanted to ask you, alongside Julia Child, you're often credited as one of the foremost experts in French cooking. If you had to sort of do your whole career over again and choose a cuisine other than French to become an expert in, what do you think you would choose? Okay, well, let me tell you something. I am looked at often, as you say, as maybe the quintessential French chef. Now, you open my book on page 32, I have a black bean soup with cilantro and chopped eggs on top of it, or banana. Then the next page, I have a southern fried chicken. Then 2 pages later, I have a Connecticut lobster roll. And then I have a Shirasti sushi. I am probably, after 32 books that I've done and hundreds of television shows, I have never been very chauvinistic about French cooking. The technique is different. But so I see myself probably as a quintessential American chef now, because I don't really have that much purely French food in what I do, anymore. Well, us Americans are impressed by the accent, of course. Oh, I have an accent? It's Connecticut. Connecticut accent. Right. The Yankee drawl. Your Connecticut accent, exactly. Yeah. So you, of course, have written many cookbooks by now, most recently Jacques Pépin, Quick and Simple, which came out last year. But do you still have a dream cookbook to write? And what's the book that you haven't written yet? Well, I'm in the process of doing 2 books. So one of them coming out next year, the year after. Going back to my painting at home after almost 55 years of marriage, in the early 70s, well, 69 even, we started writing down the menu. When people came to my house, we wrote down what we served them, and people signed and said funny things or whatever. Well, that has mushroomed into 12 large books that I have with over 50 years of memory. And I have many people there, from my mother to my 2 brothers to many other people who are gone, who are in those books. So this, for me, is my whole life in those books of memory. I also started, when I did those books of menu, starting to illustrate them, and very often I illustrate them with chicken drawing. So
I continue panning chicken and cooking chicken. But so now I wanted to do a book of chicken panning. And my editor a couple of years ago said, yeah, that's great. We would love to do it, but we want recipe with it. I said, I don't want to do recipe. I have enough recipe. So I finally, we went in between. So I said, okay, I will write story about chicken and about eggs, of course, chicken and egg. I don't know. I have a book called The Apprentice, which is a kind of cook's memoir that I did years ago. So that would be a bit of the same idea. Whatever I serve, maybe the president, whatever I ate when I was in China, to what my mother used to do, friend of mine, funny story. So it's just story about eggs and about chicken, which goes with the book. So this is the first book coming out. The second book is a book on budget cooking, kind of show people economy in the kitchen. So I had a column in the New York Times in the 80s called The Purposeful Cook, which was doing that type of thing. So I'm retaking this to do a book again on that.
Yeah, you are. I can't wait to read those. Do you keep chickens in your garden? Do you have your own chickens?
Not anymore. I used to, but now I have a beautiful woman from Jamaica, like a quarter of a mile down the road here, who raise chicken and duck and goose sometimes, which are free, happy chicken with worm. So that's where I get my eggs. That's where I get my chicken too very often.
And your models for painting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I went there to take picture the other day with chicken on my shoulder. They just sit there.
Aw, little do they know that you have a great idea for some coq au vin up your sleeve.
Well, coq au vin is the old classic French classic dishes from Lower Burgundy. That's where I am from. But I don't think that I've done a coq au vin. Well, I haven't done a coq au vin probably in like 30 years, because usually I've done a poulet au vin, because the coq is the old hen, and that's why you used to do it as the whole coq, and that's why you use it in a stew, cooking for hours. But now most chefs are doing that with a regular chicken.
Well, Jacques, thank you so much for joining me on the Taste Podcast. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and happy cooking to you.
I'm in the studio with Adam Reiner, the CEO, the creator, the janitor, as he says, of the Restaurant Manifesto. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So we're talking about a story that you wrote for Taste recently that really took off with our audience. It was probably one of our most popular stories in the past few months, and I wanted to have you in to talk about it because there's a bit of an update. The story is The Pastry Chef's Lost Cookbook, and it's about Gina DePalma's Lost Cookbook. First off, Adam, just tell us, what is the Restaurant Manifesto exactly?
So it's a website that I created in 2014. The reason that I created it was because I started to kind of think about how I could impart some of the knowledge that I had earned over the years working in the restaurant world to help people become better diners. I've always thought that dining out is a skill, even though people don't think about it like cooking. It is something that I think you can improve upon, and the way to do that, I think, is to be just more aware of what's going on. So I kept having this feeling while I was working in restaurants that I would be taking care of people that would do things that I thought were, not helping the situation, even though they were asking for something maybe the wrong way, and that there were ways that I could kind of coach them in a way. So it started out as kind of like dining tips. I think the word manifesto is a little rigid for what it is. It's really more of kind of become like an ideological pursuit. It's trying to, again, help people understand that they have a really important role in creating a great dining experience. Leaning in instead of leaning back. I think people think about dining out as like, oh, I'm just going to let it all go and it's just going to be great and it's going to come to me.
Yeah, and those individuals working there are not human in some ways. Sometimes people
on the worst end of it. But even in a harmless way, I think sometimes people don't realize how like maybe ignoring a server's greeting, for example, might be something that really sinks the tenor of the rest of the meal.
Absolutely. So we'll get to the Gina story because I really want to focus on that. But give us, during these pandemic days, for our listeners, what's something that a mindful diner can do to really make the difference when dining out at a high-end restaurant or even at a fast casual Chili's or Applebee's?
Well, I think the most important thing is to pay attention to everything and to really acknowledge things that are happening around you. You know, just as a basic thought, people think that asking a server their name is a way of humanizing them. And actually, I think that it's something that you should never do right away. You should always develop a relationship with the person serving you before you ask them any information about themselves. You know, and I think people have their heart is in the right place when they do that. But I think this is a time right now where the people serving you need even more of that sense of acknowledgement. So like the minute you walk into the restaurant, say hello. You know, say you're excited to be there. That's so important. You can disarm the most grumpy server in the world just by saying, we're really excited to be here.
I love that tip because it's true. And really, we as diners sometimes get caught up in the moment of, you know, it's a celebration with family or we're in a rush and we just need to get something in our mouths and we don't think about the human element. So just saying a quick hello, which many listeners may ultimately do always because they're nice people. But in general, thinking about these servers and the cooks who are coming out too as more than just serving you, right?
Also, you know, to your point, also think about the people that are taking care of you as partners in that pursuit. You know, if you're really thinking about them as there to deliver that experience of celebration or whatever, then you're kind of missing it. And chances are you're going to have like a more removed, kind of less of a connection. So what I'm saying, I think in general, is that you can really do things actively to improve the connection that you feel with who's taking care of you.
So you wrote this powerful story about a lost cookbook of a pastry chef named Gina DePalma. So first off, just describe your relationship with Gina, who she was, and really a little bit of the background of the cookbook that was really lost until you rediscovered it.
Sure. So Gina DePalma was the executive pastry chef of Babbo Restaurant in New York City. It opened in June of 1998, and Gina was the opening pastry chef.
Famously Mario Batali's restaurant, too.
That's right. So she had worked at Gramercy Tavern with the, great Claudia Fleming as sort of her, she was her protege. I think that, I don't know the exact series of events, but Gina was working, I think, as an executive pastry chef at I think it was called the Cub Room, and had been suggested to Mario, maybe by Tom Colicchio or someone in the Gramercy orbit. And her experiences were perfect for that. She was Italian-American like Mario. She really believed in sort of the simplicity of food like Mario. So they opened in 1998. I don't think that they ever would have imagined that it would become sort of the iconic restaurant that it became. But her desserts also really became sort of known for their simplicity, for their elegance. Gina was the type of person that really just didn't like things fussed with. And so a lot of her desserts were really just like everything Mario would preach, simple Italian ingredients presented in a simple way, no swirly sauces, none of that. So she, in 2007, published Dolce Italiano, which was her first book. It was called Recipes from the Babbo Kitchen, but honestly, a lot of those recipes were not from the Babbo Kitchen. It was just used to sell the book. And then in 2009, I believe, she won the James Beard Award for Outstanding Pastry Chef, which was a nationwide and is a nationwide award. And then intermittently between those two times, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. At the time that she was diagnosed, she was living and traveling in Italy, specifically in Rome, to research her second book, which is the topic of my article.
And so fast forward to today, and you find a Word document in your inbox.
Right. So a colleague of mine, mutual colleague, sent me the file after I wrote a story for Edible Manhattan about Gina. And the story that I wrote in Edible was really about talking about Gina's legacy in the aftermath of Me Too. It was sort of saying, why are we not thinking about these great women chefs who, their careers are over? Instead of just thinking that we need to reform things going forward, let's look back and celebrate those legacies. So someone, after that article came out, a friend of hers and a friend of mine, sent me the file, and it took me, I didn't open it for a year first of all, I didn't even know it existed. So it was a shock to even to get it. But I think that there was really something emotionally, because Gina and I were friends and I worked with Gina for 10 years at Babbo, that I just wasn't ready. And so when early in the pandemic, it sort of became like a great opportunity for me to open it, to look at it, and to read it. And one of the things that just blew me away was how beautiful the writing was. And it occurred to me that people know Gina as an accomplished chef, but that her legacy as an author is something that had been ignored.
So Gina passes, and the manuscript is in what condition? And I guess the question is she passed, and then the publisher who was going to publish the book kind of put it in a drawer and forgot about it. Is that the sense that you got from your reporting?
My sense about it was that there was a difference of opinion throughout the process between her editor at Norton at the time, where I think they wanted her to create like a straight cookie cutter book that was focused on recipes. And she was writing a book that was really travel essays and a cultural document that also included recipes, which I think we both can agree is exactly what people want today. But this was in 2008-ish when she was working on the book. So I think that so she was sick through all this time, which made it very, very difficult, I think, for that back and forth. But I think that like a few years before her death, it was completed, it was finished. She submitted a manuscript that was done. And I think that at that point that the publishers had decided that they didn't want to go ahead and publish the book. As far as the condition, I'm not a book editor, so I can't really tell you what I, professionally think. But just as a casual observer, it seems like it is completely in finished form and ready to go. There may need to be some editing, but I think that Gina wanted this thing to be published in the condition that it is currently in.
Which takes us to the current day, where the story was published over a month ago, and it was shared tens of thousands of times and made its way all over the world. And we got comments from friends of Gina. You got comments from friends of Gina. So where are we now? Because there have been some updates and some developments since the story published. Where are we now? And do you get a sense that we may actually see this cookbook come to life?
I am optimistic. You're absolutely right that there were a lot of people reaching out. She was so well loved in the restaurant community, and also I think in the food media community. I think a lot of people also recognize, like I do, that she's somebody whose career was probably overlooked by the kind of grandiosity of Batali and Bastianich, and that they also want to participate in kind of righting that wrong. So I've gotten a lot of messages from people in the food media industry. Kate Crater just published a beautiful piece on Bloomberg with one of the recipes from the book. There's a website that's called Eat Your Books, I think, that posted about it. And the person who runs the site reached out to Gina's sister and told her that messages were pouring in with people that were offering to help crowdsourcing and that they would use their site to do that. And then also there have been conversations, which I'm most optimistic about, between agents and publishers, that it looks like there is potentially an opportunity to revive and rekindle the project, only that the same challenges remain in terms of not having a live author to promote the book. Everything today with cookbooks seems to be designed around a tour and appearances around the country and around the world. And that's obviously something, when you have an author that's passed away, that isn't possible anymore.
I hope, though, that there is some foresight into the future of books. I think the way she frames this book as a cultural observation of Rome, we have the context of her time with Batali, and there's a rich text here that I believe a publisher can mine from to create a really unique book. And then maybe you yourself could be the one speaking about the book, or somebody from the family. And I do hope this book is published, and I am optimistic as well. So I'd like to close with a couple recipes from the book that you just love and that you think, because I know in the piece you really do write about the quality of the recipe writing and how pastry in Italy is sometimes overlooked, and this book has maybe unlocked some secrets. So what are some recipes you like?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me is that how much Gina ties in sacraments and religious things. There are quite a few recipes, and I wish I had the names in front of me because I might botch the names, but quite a few recipes. There's one called Torta di Margherita, and there's a whole story about Margherita of Savoy, and there's a lot of political discussions around it. But the ones that I really wanted to focus on for the story were specifically things that I remembered from the restaurant, which in this book, it's not the exact recipes from Babbo. It's kind of like little, twists and turns. The fig budino, which she always made these beautiful pudding cakes, which were not like spoonable puddings. They almost taste like a bread pudding, but they were like actual cakes. The staff always went crazy when she would bring those out. She made wonderful semifreddo. The book has one with honey called Mille Fiori honey and pistachios. Her cookies were amazing. There's an amaretti recipe in the book with a beautiful story about how she visited a town in Piedmont where they're famous for amaretti. It almost seems like the town only produces amaretti. So just envisioning Gina traveling in Italy, rediscovering her roots, and having this personal journey and bringing you along with it. I mean, it almost feels like a Netflix program or something like that.
She probably would have had her own show if she would have, seen Netflix, right?
I mean, but again, it's at the time that she was writing this wasn't really something that was going on at the time, either in visual media or in written media. So it really does feel to me like the publishing world would be absolutely out of their minds not to pick this up.
Well, let's hope. And we'll keep following the story. I believe there'll be a follow-up story on Taste at some point. I think that there's much more to write. Adam Reiner, thank you for joining the Taste Podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The Taste Podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Hezel. The show is produced by Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Our theme music is by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.